Alright YouTube, so before we even really hop into it, I don't necessarily want to make another video about the Final Fantasy VII Remake ending and Zack being alive or not being alive. The community's mixed on it. I think for the most part, more people think that he is alive, but there are a lot of people out there that subscribe to the theory of him possibly still being dead. So what we have today is another translation coming out of the Final Fantasy VII Remake Material Ultimania. The translation, of course, coming to us from Aitaikimochi on Twitter. We're just going to hop right into the tweet from her. She says, there's a very peculiar title for a storyboard in the FF7R Material Ultimania called Ending Zack's Victory. Here's cutscene director Miyake's, I think that's how you say his name, comment about the ending scene with Zack. From the beginning of production, we envisioned what the reception from fans would be in regards to this scene. After the game was released, we saw the reactions of many fans around the world, and most people hoped for Zack's happiness. It made us once again realize his character's popularity. So first up, the quote that he gives us is kind of nothing. It doesn't really tell us anything about Zack, whether Zack is or isn't alive. It doesn't talk about the ending, really. It doesn't talk about the multiple timelines, whether there is or isn't. It doesn't really give us anything. All his quote really says is that when they began production, they wondered how fans would react to the scene. Game came out. They've seen the fans' reactions. Most people hoped for him to be alive. That's kind of it. What people are running with is the title of this section. As she points out in her tweet, it's called Ending Zack's Victory. And for a lot of people, again, that's confirmation. As it's so weird when it comes to this, man, is we get these such vague things, and people take it as full-on 100% confirmation. You can't argue it. And it's so weird to me. Now, what I will say is that this being titled Zack's Victory would be the strongest and biggest piece of evidence, I think, so far, that he would be alive. Just because everything else has been so vague in the past. But titling something Zack's Victory, I think that is the biggest piece of evidence so far. But as somebody who views that ending scene in a very different light than other people, most people, again, subscribe to the theory that he's alive and that's it. It's not confirmation of anything for me, because whichever theory you subscribe to, whether you think Zack is or isn't alive, the scene is implied that he was victorious. So that title doesn't mean anything. Even for somebody like me who's in the minority that thinks Zack might still die, I can agree that he's victorious in that fight. Yeah, that is Zack's victory. But there's also supposed to be, according to the original game and Crisis Core, a couple of extra troops after he defeats the massive amount of troops. And that's the point where Zack actually dies, right there on that cliff edge overlooking Midgar, which we see him dragging Cloud to at the end of the game. So to me, it's just, I take the scene as we haven't got to those troops yet. And as I've mentioned in the past before, if we do get a follow-up to this ending, and like there are those extra troops, and they try to attack Zack, he could still very well just demolish them and live, and that could be what happens. But my whole thing is, again, I feel like we haven't got to that moment yet, where those troops try to kill him. So there's no confirmation that he's going to live yet. And naturally, of course, my dudes, this is just my thoughts and opinion on the situation. I'm no more right than anybody else. I'm just giving my thoughts on how I interpret the ending of Remake. And my thing is, between the Ultimania, the Material Ultimania, and some of the stuff we've seen and heard, it's always just been so vague, dude. The original Ultimania was like, why is there two Buster Swords in the indie scene? Well, the Zack scene takes place in the past. That's why there's two goddamn swords. That's not confirmation of anything. But people take quotes like that and run with it as confirmation of him being alive. And it's like, what? That takes place like 3 months before the events of the original FF7 story. Zack hasn't passed the sword on to Cloud yet. That's why you're seeing two Buster Swords. You're looking way too much into it. Or maybe not enough, I guess. I don't know. People say that Zack confirms that he killed everybody with the ending scene, but no, he questions. He says, wait, was that all of them? And for me, as somebody who thinks there's those extra troops that are going to possibly attack him, it's just kind of foreshadowing that no, that is not all of them. We also have like the rain during the end scene, which is when Zack actually like fights those guys and dies, is whenever the rain is happening, and we see him dragging Cloud to the edge of the cliff, which is where he's supposed to die at. To me, the scene has a lot of foreshadowing of Zack dying. Something else that bothers me that I feel like not enough people are addressing is that the scene where Zack is supposed to survive is roughly about 50 seconds, like 49 to 50 seconds before the explosion happens behind him that throws him, which means that the Whisperers were still alive and around during that entire fight. So how, please answer me this, how could he possibly survive if the Whisperers are there to make sure he dies? The only two things that make sense is either it's a massive oversight by the developers, or it's because we haven't got to his death point yet, because he dies again with the last couple of troops. He survives the giant army of troops in Crisis Core as well. It's the last few that actually get him. Some people have said that we defeated the Whisperers all throughout time, which is how Zack does survive this scene. Which, okay, maybe that's the case, but do you understand how much of an impact that has, right? If we're defeating the Whisperers all throughout time, you know, from the past, present, future, that means we are defeating them before they can ever intervene with anything ever. So they're never there to make sure stuff happens. Do you understand the kind of ripple effect that's going to have? It's not even just life and death stuff. They intervene with things like whenever Hojo was about to tell Cloud that he wasn't ever a member of Soldier, they stopped him from doing that, right? So we see them intervene on things that are big and small, life and death. Sometimes it's just people discovering or not discovering information. So for us to defeat them all throughout time would have such an impact on the world of Gaia as a whole, and also the story of Final Fantasy VII, that it just seems so ridiculous. Like, we're talking massive role-changing things here. If we defeat them all throughout time, that means they're not there in the past. So maybe they're not there to make sure that Sephiroth goes on the mission to Nibelheim. Maybe he never discovers Jenova, or discovers his true origins and past, and never destroys Nibelheim. Maybe he's still a good guy Sephiroth in this different timeline. Like, there's all kinds of things that could happen from us defeating them all throughout time. You're talking everybody that was supposed to die might not die now. 100 years ago. Maybe Cloud's dad's still alive right now or some shit. Like, we don't know what impact this could have. But if we defeat them all throughout time and the only outcome of it is that Zack survived, and that tells me the Square Enix developers don't know shit about time travel and butterfly effect. And we could go on and on with examples, man. Maybe Ifalna never died. Maybe Cloud's mom never died. Maybe, Tifa's dad never died. Maybe Barret never lost his arm and never got Marlene. Like, we could go on and on with the effects that this would have. Hell, maybe Hojo failed in his experiment in the past to even create Sephiroth. Like, the Whispers wouldn't be there all throughout time, past, present, future, to make sure things happen like they're supposed to, which is why this is so absurd to me and doesn't make any sense. There's also a couple questions that I have about Zack surviving that nobody's been able to answer for me this entire time we've been talking about it, is if he survived in a different timeline, how does that affect our story? If he survived in Timeline 2, remakes in Timeline 1, that doesn't affect us, so it doesn't matter. It's all pointless. Secondly, if we did hop to the timeline in which Zack did survive, there'd be copies of characters. Nobody's been able to address this either. If we hop to Zack's timeline where he's alive still, there'd be 2 Clouds, 2 Aeris, 2 Tifas, 2 Red 13s, 2 Barretts. How are they going to handle that? The only thing I don't really have an argument for, or that I can't account for these days, is the different stamp logo, because as time's gone on, I've had more evidence shown to me, and somebody pointed out that there is a stamp logo within Aeris' room in the Shinra building. She hasn't been in that room in years at this point, since she's like a little kid or whatever. So that would imply that that's been the logo for a very, very long time in this timeline, but then you have the different stamp logo with the Zack scene, so that is an implication of it being a different timeline. And to be honest, the logo in Aeris' room is a fantastic piece of evidence. Whoever, first discovered that, bravo to them, because it's definitely important. Because that room has not been touched in years, right? She hasn't been in the room since she was like a kid or something. And the events we see at the end of Remake with Zack, possibly surviving, is only a couple months before the events of FF7, so it's definitely sometime after Aerith would have left that room. But we see all throughout the story of Remake that the current logo for Stamp is the Beagle, which would imply that the scene we've seen with Zack is happening in some sort of alternate timeline or something. So I've definitely kind of circled back around to the multiple timeline theory. I believed it at first, and then there's some stuff that maybe like kind of fall off of that idea, and then now I'm kind of back to it because of the one logo in Aerith's bedroom. It's honestly a crucial piece of evidence. Something else that I don't know if we've ever talked about, or maybe we haven't talked about enough, is the quote from Nomura with the initial Ultimania. His quote is saying, "We wanted to have the last boss fight take place on the highway in Midgar, which arises questions that I cannot answer. There's a character who's alive, which leads to a great mystery." And with that quote, it's implied to be Zack. That's what a lot of people think, and it definitely could be about Zack, but it could also just simply be about Sephiroth, right? The characters in both Remake and the original FF7 during the Midgar segment aren't aware that Sephiroth is still alive somewhere, up until the last final moments of the game with, the Shinra building and the highway and stuff like that. So Nomura could simply just be talking about Sephiroth. But also during those final moments of the game with the final cutscene and things, we see that Biggs is alive, which could lead to the great mystery. And there's a lot of people that think because of the gloves on the table that Jesse could possibly be alive. And we know that Wedge is more than likely alive as well. So there could be a lot of different characters this is talking about. When we discussed this topic in the past, and I've talked about the possibility of Zack dying, I've had people comment and say, well, if they tease us with him possibly living, and then turn right around and kill him, you know how many people that's going to piss off? And I'm over here like, what about the original fans, man? What about the original story, the sanctity of the original story, and the purpose of Zack's death? Like, how much of an impact that has on Cloud, the person, the character? It's such a critical moment in the overall Final Fantasy VII story. It's a defining moment for Cloud. It's what gives him his signature weapon. It's on par with Aerith living, man. Like, Zack surviving would change so much about the story. For one, Cloud would never become a mercenary that helps Avalanche to take down Shinra. That just wouldn't happen, right? He wouldn't even have the Buster Sword to be able to do it. Secondly, the first thing that Zack would do after getting Cloud help within Midgar would go right to Aerith. And they'd obviously get back together, and there'd never be this, like, her yearning for her long-lost boyfriend. She would never be interested in Cloud. Cloud would never remind her of her lost boyfriend. Her and Cloud would probably never even meet, because he would never be a part of Avalanche. Like, I could go on and on with this stuff, man. This is part of why I haven't made a video about the ending and Zack in a while, because I could go in circles talking about this stuff all day long, man. We can make a 20, 30-minute video about this shit. I just feel like there's going to be a lot of plot holes, and I don't know if they're going to be able to handle the multiple timelines, time travel, whatever's going on exactly, how it should be handled. And maybe I'm the one looking too much into it. At the end of the day, it is just a video game. It doesn't have to be scientifically accurate, but still, I can't help but look at it that way. At the end of the day, it is just the title of one section of the Material Ultimania. It just says Zack's victory. And again, I don't think that's confirmation of him living, simply because he won that same fight in Crisis Core right before he died. But at the end of the day, of course, it all remains to be seen. We won't know anything until part 2 comes out, right? And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's not a big deal. I can handle it. This is my interpretation of the ending of the game. I could absolutely be wrong, and I'm fine with that. Anyways, videos, that's pretty much the video. It's so much longer than I thought it was going to be. We haven't talked about this subject in a while, so I guess a lot of my chest I wanted to kind of talk about, discuss things that we haven't talked about in the past, though, so it is kind of new to this channel. And we haven't talked about this subject in a while, so I want to pass off a similar question as we've done in the past. Do you think, with the ending of Remake, is Zack alive? Is he dead? Do you think there are multiple timelines? And do you think that we are in the Remake timeline or Zack's timeline or what? What's going on? What are your thoughts? Either way, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. We'll stay updated more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on all my notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @dashingdavid. I'm a Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Low Gain or leave it like Cobain.